Hi and welcome to another edition of Four Wheels Good, the only weekly motoring programme to run right the way throughout the year. Well, later on, Ginny Buckley will be finding out what sort of skills are taught by the Institute of Advanced Motorists and discovering how many bad habits she's got into since passing her test. Eamonn O'Neill will be in Los Angeles with a car club dedicated to dancing vehicles and, more seriously, investigating the increase in false insurance claims. Well, also this week we have a good dose of the irrepressible Mike Rutherford. Our rebel without a pause will be delivering his motoring manifesto later. But first, here he is with a look at Citroen's fun passenger version of their award-winning Berlingo van.
Well, cast your mind back to October of last year when we were at the Paris Motor Show. We had a long chat with Citroen then about the new Berlingo family of vehicles. We've already got the Berlingo van in Great Britain, and another member of the Berlingo family, I'm pleased to say, is about to go on sale in Britain. It's this one we're with now. Do you call it a people carrier, a multispace?
No, we call it multispace because it has a lot of space, and also it has a big sunroof, so the sun can enter into the Berlingo. So it's a new concept. I mean, it's what we call in French ludique. Ludique, it means attractive.
It's totally unique, it seems to me. There aren't any other manufacturers I can think of that have a vehicle like this.
It's a new concept which enters into a brand new market. So in Europe, we are selling this car, but without the big sunroof.
Yeah.
And it's already a big success. So we are very successful, for instance, in Italy, and we have a lot of orders without the sunroof. So I know that the English are like the sunroof.
Yeah, we like the sunroof because our weather is so bad. We like to see how bad the weather is through the sunroof. We should call it the rain roof. One little disappointment for me is that we don't have 5 doors. What is the reason for that? Because it would be much better, surely, to have a rear door here for the rear passengers.
Well, the main reason is, I mean, the style. Because if you have another door, it will destroy the style, first of all. The other point is, if you have another door, the door will open right on the seat, not on the wrong side of the seat.
Sure.
So it will be difficult to open.
Okay.
But on the style, it's much better like that.
But it's also true to say, though, that once you're inside the car, it's very passenger friendly. There's lots of storage space, lots of fun inside as well. Not such a serious car, I think.
No, it's a car for young people, and it's designed to give a new image for Citroën, an image which will be much younger than the other serious car.
And quite a nice driver's car, because I've driven the Berlingo van, and it very, very car-like. You don't feel you're driving a van, you feel like you're driving an ordinary car.
It's not an ordinary car, it's the Berlingo multispace.
Yes, notice how the sun always shines on those car promotional videos. Well, we'll have a chance to drive the new Berlingo ourselves in a few months, and we'll have another report then. Well, from a very sensible vehicle to a bunch of extremely silly ones. What do you do if you and your mates have some time on your hands, unlimited cash, and a deep desire to get noticed? Eamonn O'Neill reports now from Los Angeles.
tomorrow we're supposed to get some rain out of this new storm.
Southern California, where only a tropical rainstorm can cool car fever. But with sun and surf restored, out come the lowriders. These are custom cars with a difference. Strengthen the chassis, fill the boot with expensive airplane hydraulics, add control switches to the dash, and you're dancing. So what's the turn on?
Playing with the hydraulics was really fun. Finding another car in the street that was cruising by, ready to hit the switch, you know, that's the fun. It's more competition-like thing, you know, with friends. You know, it's really friendly. You meet a lot of people.
And of course you say, hey, look at me, don't you?
Yeah, it's the attention getter. There you go.
Lowriders began in the 1930s when custom car builders reduced ground clearance to improve handling and found it looked cool. The jumping idea came when show cars began to use variable height suspension to help get them on and off the trailers that carried them to competitions.
I bought this car about 5 years ago. It started out as a lowrider. I put the hydraulics in it. It was wide at the time. Needed more attention, so I cut the top off the car to give it the convertible look. It's got a replaceable top that goes on there also.
You just put a couple of swivel chairs in there, obviously, yes,
to get in and out. Yeah.
Television, bottle of
TV.
wine. Hey, you can't beat it. Let's have a look at the front end.
Okay.
And the detail, even on the wheel arches, is something special there, isn't it? Look at that.
Yeah, a fellow by the name of Jack Hernandez. We were preparing for a show just last year. Painted all the graphics, the candy colors, and the mural inside the four-wheel wells, all four wheels.
Is this a champion car then?
It's number 3 in the world. My competition has been tough.
By the way, that gold plating effect is real gold plate. So what's the price tag?
I've had this car apart, I'd say about 4 times during the show circuits, and last calculation came out to about a little more than $50,000 on this car.
Is it worth it?
I've got my rewards from it, yes. I've won a few shows, collected some money. It's more the fun of competition. Competition is really the fun part.
And the will to win produces unusual artwork. The pretty girls seem to go hand in hand with these cars. Every time you see a photograph in a magazine of a lowrider or a car like this, there's a pretty girl sitting on the hood or the bonnet, isn't there?
Yeah.
What's the connection? Just add a bit of glamour, perhaps?
It adds a touch, you know, to the car. A pretty girl always enhances the car when you stand there next to it, you know.
And more than that, he wouldn't say, while the cars danced on.
Well, I suppose that's one way of getting over the speed humps, only in America. Well, let's bring ourselves back to earth now with an innovation in the world of car safety. It's generally recognised nowadays that modern cars are safer than ever. The cars we were happily driving in the 60s, for instance, were devoid of crumple zones, side impact beams or, of course, airbags. Well, Volvo have now gone one step further with airbag technology, as Peter Baker reports.
Around 25% of all car accidents are side collisions. So that's why Volvo felt it important to look at ways to reduce the crash impact in scenarios such as these. The Strengthening Side Impact Protection System, or SIPS, was introduced in 1991. 3 years later, Volvo brought in the Side Impact Airbag, or the SIPS bag. The company claimed that the combination of SIPS and SIPS bags reduced the risk of serious injury in a side impact by 40%. But now, Volvo announced the inflatable curtain, which after years of research by a dedicated team in Sweden, should provide valuable protection against head injuries for driver and passengers. Basically, on impact, the new system inflates side curtains extremely fast and provides a cushion between the head and the car. The curtain fully inflates in about 25 milliseconds after being triggered by a sensor. The safety curtain is part of the third generation of Volvo's safety equipment aimed at reducing injury in side impact collisions and will be available on Volvos from the end of 1998.
Well, yet another safety device nobody hopes they'll actually have to use. Well, if you tuned in hoping to escape news of the UK general election, well, you sort of have. After the break, our own Mike Rutherford will be proclaiming his own motoring manifesto. So keep watching. I think you'll be surprised. Hi again, welcome back to Four Wheels Good here on Granada's Men and Motors channel. Well, if you saw this photo in the UK edition of Auto Express recently, you probably thought it was Rick Mail as his Alan Bastard character, but under all that gear it was, of course, our own motoring journalist Mike Rutherford. Well, although some parts of his manifesto are pretty tongue-in-cheek, most of it is quite sensible, as Ginny Buckley discovered from Mike's campaign headquarters.
Well, the general election is looming. It's a matter of days away from us now. And the theme this year really seems to have been that television presenters and reporters are all getting in on the act. So we're not going to be outdone on Four Wheels Good, are we, Mike?
We're not. We've got we get serious on Four Wheels Good. We're actually talking politics. We're talking manifestos, and we're telling the politicians and perhaps the public as well the sort of things that the next government should be doing on the roads.
To be fair, it's actually our very own rebel without a pause, Mike Rutherford, who's been working on the election manifesto. And I've gone through and I've picked out some of the finer points from it, because it's a bit long, to be honest, and we'd be here for about 3 weeks if we went through it all. But seriously, Mike, drunk drivers, what do you feel? This is your first point on the 97 election manifesto, according to Mr. Rutherford. Drunk drivers.
Well, I actually think let me make an admission on air. I've probably gone out drinking when I shouldn't have been driving. I'm not going to admit that I've been drinking and driving as such and breaking the law, but I've been to pubs during summer just like everybody else and had a beer or two, and maybe perhaps not known if I've been below the limit or above the limit. And I don't like having to guess that every time I go to a pub, every time I have a drink. So I think the easiest way for me and everybody else is to have a 0 alcohol limit. If you're driving, you cannot drink. And that means, of course, that if you're stopped and you've had one drink, well, you're banned from driving for a year because you're over the limit and you shouldn't be driving.
Fair enough, but next day, right, OK, you go out for a few drinks on a Friday night.
Yeah.
What about the next morning? There's always going to be a trace of alcohol in your bloodstream the next day. So how do you cover that one?
Well, there's two types of driving the next morning, as it were. One is when you're driving the next morning and you're still drunk from the night before, effectively. You're still over the limit, which is a major problem. But I think probably what you're talking about is what happens if you go out on a Friday night, or come to that on a Sunday lunchtime. You down a bottle of wine, and then on a Monday morning you're driving to work. Of course, I'm not saying that somebody who has a drink on a Sunday lunchtime should be done on Monday morning. And even if a few traces of alcohol do crop up in the blood test, I think that there's got to be an enormous amount of discretion. And if on a Monday morning you're seen to have a little bit of alcohol in your blood, I think, like I said, discretion comes into play, and of course you wouldn't be banned, you wouldn't even be fined. That's sensible. Let's not forget, of course, that you can create some alcohol in your blood without even having a drink. Certain foods, if you eat an awful lot of fruit, for example, you'll get alcohol in your blood. And again, the same rule would apply. But what I'm really saying is that if somebody stands in a pub and has half a lager or a glass of wine, then they're over the limit. And then we know where we stand. You see, that's I'm being selfish in a way. You know, at the moment, I guess. Sometimes I go out and have a couple of halves of lager, a couple of glasses of wine. I don't know if I'm over the limit or not. Take all the guesswork out of it and just have a 0 limit.
The people that may be the ones to introduce it, the MPs. Now, they have a nice life, don't they? Ministerial limos. Well, they have an easy life.
You're probably going to say I'm being extreme now, but for starters, with
it's always extreme.
with ministers, the first thing I'd do is charge them for parking, like the rest of us. When politicians, MPs in particular, go to somewhere like the House of Commons or your local civic centre, how often do you see a town hall where everybody's paying a fortune to park around the town hall, but the town hall car park has lots of cars parked in it free of charge, councillors and all sorts of other people. They should be paying. The MPs in Westminster, there's a nice underground car park at Westminster. They should be paying the going rate, which is about 25 quid a day in London, to park their cars in or near Westminster. And as for ministerial limos, I mean, they run around in Rovers and Jaguars and whatnot at the moment. I think it's quite simple. They should all be running around in Rover 100s, the Metro, as it still should be called, because that, of course, is one of the least safe cars on the road. And as far as I'm concerned, all our ministers can be in the least safe car on the road.
OK, Mike, next point on here. The road fund licence, we eliminate it. So how do you make up for the lost revenue?
Well, it's very simple. There is a system already in place. VAT and duty is charged on fuel, so the infrastructure is there. The paperwork is already being done. Money is already going to the Treasury in that department. You just give the Treasury a bit more. You put a little bit more tax on fuel. You do away with the archaic tax disc, the road fund licence, and you eliminate fraud overnight. There will be no road tax disc evasion because you can't evade it anymore. You're paying for it. The only way of evading it, of course, is not paying for your fuel. And of course, that way, with a penny or two on fuel to make up for that lost revenue, that means that the more you drive, the more you pay, and that surely must be the way to go. Currently, if you're a little old lady, a pensioner who uses her car once a week, you pay the same road tax as the rep doing 50,000 miles a year. Go to my system, the rep pays an awful lot more for his fuel during the course of the year. The little old lady at the end of the year saves money because she's only buying a couple of tanks full every year.
It seems fair, and also you save on all the money that you spend chasing people who do evade the licence.
Yeah, and also you free the. How often have you seen the police checking to see if somebody's got a road tax disc? I don't want to see police officers, highly trained police officers, chasing people for crimes like that. I want to see police officers chasing the real criminals. You know, the carjackers, the car thieves, the people who vandalise cars, and 1,000,001 other crimes. I want to see police officers doing real policing. And I want to see police officers doing administrative work, which is chasing people who have forgotten maybe to renew their road tax. And let me look at the camera and admit this on air. I am speaking as somebody who's been done for not having road tax before. Not because I was trying to evade it, because it's financially it's not worth
because
evading.
You're just so busy being an international jet setter and never in the country.
Oh, was it run out, officer? I didn't have a clue.
Now, you talk then about groups of people that break the law. Now, there's a group here that we think should be added to this. Clampers. We hate clampers, don't we? And why do we hate them?
Well, I don't think we can say on air precisely why we hate them and what we'd like to do with them, but we can...
You said it 5 minutes ago, so come on.
Yeah, and I've said it to a few of their faces. I mean, these people are, you know, it's legalised mugging. I mean, that's what it is. There's a law that says they can go round impounding people's property, then holding a gun at your head saying, unless you give me £100, £150, I'm not going to give you your property back. It would be a bit like being in a restaurant and somebody grabbing your coat or your jacket from behind your table and saying, well, I'm not going to give it to you back until you pay the ransom. That's what they're doing with people's motor cars. And I think at the very least what we need is an independent body of some sort just to monitor the clamping organisations. It's about time that we turn the tables on these people. It's about time we started taking their names and their numbers and their addresses and really hounding them just as they hound us. And there should be a system that if somebody is doing something a little untoward, for example clamping people after a sign has been hidden, you know the old trick, you park somewhere, a truck is parked in front of the sign that says you can be clamped, the truck is moved, the clampers come in and clamp you, then they say afterwards, didn't you see the sign? Well, of course I didn't see the sign because it wasn't visible. I mean, that is legalised theft, and we should clamp down, if you'll excuse the pun, on those people. And similarly with parking attendants. I'm not talking now about traffic wardens, I'm talking about these privatised little Hitlers, these guys who look like they should be working on the Berlin Wall, or were working on the Berlin Wall before it was pulled down. These guys who stalk people around London, chasing them, watching them.
And it's not just London, because it's a big problem all over the country.
Absolutely,
as well.
And in fact, yeah, I'm 2 or 3 years behind the time. When they were introduced in London, I said, watch out Manchester, watch out Glasgow, watch out Birmingham. These people will start the ball rolling in London. They'll make a fortune, and then they'll move further out to all the other big cities and and eventually it'll be every small village and town. These people will go around and they work on the basis that if you overrun your time on a parking meter by 1 or 2 minutes, then you'll be done. 30 quid, 60 quid, something like that. What that means to you, let's go back to that little old lady, the pensioner maybe, who can just about afford to run a car. She goes down the supermarket, it takes her a little bit longer to get through the checkout than she thought it would. She overruns her time by a minute. and her weekly shopping bill, which was probably 20 quid, has now increased to 80 quid because she's got to pay a £60 fine. That is not justice. And again, you're probably going to call me a right-wing Genghis Khan, but I see people getting off for all sorts of serious offences. I see people getting warnings. I see people being in court for crimes they admit that they've committed. No problem, off you go, you know, slap over the wrist. I see people overrunning their time on a parking meter by a few seconds, incurring hefty fines, and that's got to be wrong.
I'm going to put a clamp on you now. You feel strongly about this one, as you can tell from that tirade. So listen, if there's any parties out there that are unsure about the manifesto still, put that one in and you'll get Mike's vote. Let's move on to something else now. Traffic congestion, which is a problem, and also trucks on the road. And what do you think about that?
Well, I've got a sort of love-hate relationship with truckers.
You love them because they deliver your goods.
Well, you know, again, we were just talking about the supermarket. We go down to the supermarket, don't we, on the weekend, and we expect all that nice fruit and veg to be there, and frozen goods and all the rest of it. And not that fruit and veg in supermarkets actually taste of anything anymore, but we still expect it to be there on the shelf, don't we? And I've got a lot of respect for these guys who work long hours and actually don't get paid very much money. But one thing really doesn't, well, two things annoy me about them. One is that I think their driving standards are dropping. You know, truck drivers in the old days it seemed to me, were craftsmen. You know, it was almost like a trade being a truck driver. Today, I mean, some of the things they do, they just work on the basis basically that I've got a 38-ton truck and it's 40 foot long, and you're in a Fiat Cinquecento that's 2 foot long, and you're going to come off worse than me, mate, so you better move out of my way.
Every viewer we have who is a truck driver is now, of course, turning the channel. Goodbye.
Of course, I'm only talking about a few of you. A very small minority.
Thank you, Mike.
But on a more serious point, perhaps, it really does annoy me, and it's more to do with the operators than the truck drivers themselves. When you see a drayman's lorry outside a pub delivering beer at 8 o'clock in the morning, when you see stores taking deliveries, clothes stores, for example, taking delivery at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. Look, there are 24 hours in the day, right? So if you just ban deliveries for a couple of hours in the morning and a couple of hours in the evening, obviously during the morning rush hours and the evening rush hours, that means you've got 20 hours a day to do your deliveries. 20 hours a day is long enough. You don't need 24 hours a day deliveries. So spare the people struggling through the rush hours in the morning and the evening.
I agree with that, and I think it should be taken further to that. I don't think they should be allowed on the roads or the motorways or town centres between the rush hours.
You say that, Ginny, but you would be the first if you went into the supermarket, or more likely with you, the clothes store, you know, and said, well, you know, is my stuff here? No, the trucks weren't allowed to travel because people like you said.
I'm only talking 4 hours a day, Mike. You know, I'm not talking 4
hours. Yeah, again, maybe it's not. Let's compromise on that. What I'd like to see is during the rush hours, the trucks sticking. If they want to venture out onto the road, they're going to be handicapped in a big way, and that handicap is on a motorway. They've got to be on the inside lane. None of this going in the middle lane, and certainly not in the outside lane. Got to stick to the middle lane. That means if one truck doing 10 miles an hour wants to be overtaken by another truck doing 15 miles an hour, too bad. The truck that wants to go a little bit faster has got to stick behind that slow one. How often have you driven in the middle lane? You know, it takes a mile for one truck to get round the other, and that causes big problems. So yeah, I'd go along with you. Ban deliveries for 4 hours a day, and ban them using the middle and outside lanes of motorways for 4 hours a day as well. But I'd be very reluctant to ban them completely, because I think actually truck drivers, unlike a lot of people in this country, probably people like me, come to think of it, are actually doing a great job, and I think they're grossly underestimated. And I think, you know, if the truck drivers were to go on strike for a week, we'd be pleading with truck drivers to go back to work. I do a lot of interviews with environmentalists and people like that, greenies, who say, get the trucks off the road. You know, they're the people whose houses are full of furniture delivered by trucks, you know, wearing clothes, their fridges are full of food delivered by trucks. Those people will be screaming for the truck drivers to go back to work. Shut up.
Well done, Mike, because all the truck drivers have just turned back on again now, so excellent. We've got you all back. Now, one other thing, okay, we drive in Europe, we go onto the continent, and we get charged, don't we? You know, I've just been over in in Spain and France driving through there, and the motorway tolls were ridiculous. They come over here, European drivers.
They come over here.
They come over here.
They use our roads. They don't pay, and actually, I haven't got an argument at all with people like. I'm glad you said the French and the Spanish. Well done, Ginny, because you picked the two correct countries there, and there is another one, the Italians, for example.
The Swiss, maybe.
The Swiss are slightly different. Maybe we'll come on to the Swiss in a minute. And the difference between those countries, the Italians, the Spaniards, the French, is that they charge us tolls and we don't charge them tolls. So we pay, I don't know, 50, 60 quid to drive from one end of France to the other on the motorway. A Frenchman or woman comes over here, drives to Scotland and doesn't pay a dime to drive on the motorway. If they're going to do it to us, we've got to do it to them. We've got to charge them. You know, you scratch our back, we'll scratch yours. You stab us in the back, we'll stab you in the back. We've got to charge these countries if they're charging us. And we've got to let off, like the Belgians, for example, the Germans, who don't charge us. The Swiss, an interesting one, because you don't pay tolls, fees as such. You just have to buy a sticker as you cross the border. Well, let's do the same to everybody coming into Britain who are from countries that charge us. And that when they come into the port of Dover or wherever, they've got to buy a sticker before they come into the country. Call it 100 quid a year. That buys them access to our roads for 100 quid a year. If they don't buy it, deport them. Send them back home.
On that Euro-friendly note, I think it's time to wrap this up. Some good points there from Mike. Some of them a bit extreme maybe, but some very good points there.
Can I rely on your vote?
Can he rely on your vote? We'll have to wait and see. I'll tell you what, I'm glad he's not really standing for election.
Yes, well, Mike's certainly got the mouth to be a politician. What a shame that his talents are needed to report on the world motoring scene. Well, in coming weeks, he'll be bringing us features from the San Diego Motor Show, where he'll be showing us world-exclusive shots of the new Volvo C70 Coupe convertible, driven by designer Peter Horbury. Well, Mike will also be giving us his forthright views on MPVs. Well, after the break, we'll be comparing Jaguar's excellent XK8 with the classic it echoes, the E-Type. Join us then. Welcome back. In the 1960s, Jaguar produced the XK engine sports car and created an instant classic. In 1968, you could buy a new E-Type for £2,000, 15 shillings and twopence, the equivalent of about £25,000 today. Of course, now Jaguar have rekindled XK nostalgia with the XK8 convertible, which retails from £55,000. Well, the new car may be twice the price, but is it twice the car? Nicky Fox and Eamonn O'Neill report.
This is what the original XK fuss was all about. 4.2 litres, 6 cylinders, twin overhead cams and 3 SU carburettors. It's gorgeous, isn't it? And that can get you from 0 to 60 in 7.2 seconds and reach a top speed of 150 miles an hour. Well, actually, that's only nearly the truth. When the press reviewed the original E-Type, the car had, well, let's say, been tweaked. And when it eventually reached the customer, it was only good for a mere 142 miles an hour.
Open up the XK8 and you'll find one of these. I'll try and say it in one breath. It's a new all-aluminium AJ V8 4-litre 32-valve quad-cam engine, and it's all covered in black plastic. Jaguar claims a 0 to 60 of 6.7 and a top speed of 154, and I've no reason to doubt their word. A third of a century on and just 12 miles an hour more. But with the average age of a Jaguar owner at 53, would more performance be advisable anyway?
Forget figures like that for now and just take a look at these cars side by side. Jaguar have deliberately reawakened the old styling cliches, and they talk about the long feline body, the low oval grille and the power bulge.
Oh yes, I can see all that, although this is much wider. Still, they both have a high waistline for that snug cockpit feel and what Jaguar calls muscular haunches. But I find the new car's relative restraint almost as seductive as the E-Type's lean, steroid-induced physique.
I should tell you that this car has another name. It's called Jack the Jag. The owner named it after his grandfather. Ian, I know this is a 1970s model and it was a left hooker when you bought it, but what condition was it in?
Oh, very poor really. I had to renew the floors, boot floor, offside wing, and generally strip it down and rebuild everything.
How long did it take?
3.5 years.
And how much is it worth now?
It's insured for 25,000.
Well, can I have a drive of it?
Don't think so, Eamonn.
How about if we offer you the chance to drive the XK8?
Okay.
In the past, we've criticised Jaguar for a number of things, such as poor legroom and irrational positioning of some switches. Well, this time they've got it right. Of course, the back's hopelessly cramped, but up here where it counts, there's excellent legroom and everything comes readily to hand. So what else have we got? Fly-off handbrake, deep-set instruments, a new 5-speed auto shift, there isn't a manual option, and a good mixture of leather and fabric trim. Press this button and the roof goes down in 20 seconds. And no, it can't be opened by a jealous passenger as an air brake on the motorway. At speeds of more than 10 miles an hour, the hood just doesn't operate. Hood up and you'll have to reverse using your side mirrors. Hood down and there's still plenty of boot space for more than just the tonneau cover.
You have to put the hood down yourself on this one, but who cares? Once you've climbed over the sill, it's still a bit of a squeeze if you like to drive with straight legs. Now what have we got? Chrome handbrake, but after that it's black, black and black. 4 manual gears, but nowhere to put your left leg. 3 windscreen wipers and a gorgeous view along that bonnet. OK, Jack, off we go.
This car is quiet and elegant, but if you put your faith in the traction control and floor it, you're gone with a growl. More sensibly driven, this car will suit the driver who likes the gentle touch. It takes light pedal pressure down below and has well-weighted power steering on top. The ride's firm but never jars, and the auto shift's really smooth. But deep engineering aside, this car gives you all the right signals. It makes you feel secure, in control and very, very smug.
Listen to that. The XK engine sounds as though it can go from 0 to 140 in top, which is just as well because I'm having a bit of trouble finding third. Serious impressions? Well, the steering's a bit heavy, but the bonnet does get shorter the longer you drive it. Corners can be a problem, not because of the handling's fine, just you catch your knuckles here. Luckily the brakes are good and the ride is firm. Having said all that, it's remarkably rattle and vibration free.
Two very beautiful cars. Which one would you choose? I'll have the P-Reg one, thanks. Now, does the price of insurance determine your choice of vehicle? If you think that the premiums you have to pay are too big, you'll be even more upset to discover that a sizable portion of your insurance premium is there to make up for criminals who perpetrate fraud. Eamonn takes a crash course in exactly what's going on.
Smack. Bang goes the bodywork, bang goes the no claims bonus. To all intents and purposes, an accident. But there's nothing accidental about this. He's going back to make sure the damage looks convincing, because this is a faked accident, the latest thing in car fraud, where the North West is top of the league. Any of us could now find ourselves unwittingly taking part in a bogus accident. The crooks don't draw the line at bashing up their own vehicles, they're setting traps for innocent drivers too.
Motor insurance fraud is costing the insurance industry around £130 million a year in the UK. The problem has become particularly worse with the advent of gangs who are staging sometimes quite complicated road traffic accidents.
But now the insurance companies are fighting back. They've produced a video to train their staff how to spot false claims and just what they involve.
It's my business, this. I do it for a living. You always find lads in the street want to earn a few quid. You know, they give them a backhander, give them a grand, they're happy, and they think they swum the channel by filling a few forms in, you know, or nipping up the hospital to have an X-ray. You know, say there's 4 of us and they've all had a bit of whiplash, and then you've got the 3 people in that. Obviously, they can really go to town because it weren't their fault. Easy money, really. And the insurance companies, well, they're the losers, really. Big business, these cars.
But if the insurers spot something that triggers their suspicions, they'll call in their own private investigator to dig deeper. And for one private eye at least, there's no doubt where this caper sprang from.
The fraud in this country does seem to start in Liverpool and Manchester, and this is no different. When you've got a new type of fraud, you have to work through it, and it's very, very difficult the first time you come across a circumstance. Now, I know within my own company, and it's true within other companies, that we've dealt with, you know, maybe 1,000 or more, and you start to be able to do the job more quickly, do the job more efficiently, and that does make the job harder for the fraudster. We're talking about millions of pounds being lost to this kind of fraud.
So, almost the perfect crime. Rich pickings and no one gets hurt. But every penny fiddle puts up the prices of our premiums. Bogus accidents mean fraud, and fraud means more expensive insurance for all of us. Now the good news. Some tips to avoid being set up by the bogus crash merchants. If anyone is injured or claims to be injured in an accident, phone the police. Get the details of anyone and everyone in the other vehicle. Often criminals claim they were carrying a multitude of passengers when obviously they weren't. Always carry a cheap disposable camera with you and take as many photographs as you can of the scene. Try to get the details of the independent witnesses, but beware of accomplices planted by the criminals. If you can, make a little sketch and jot down all the details. What happened, where, who was involved. Do it on the back of an envelope, but do it as quickly as you can. The villains have no qualms about faking accidents or faking injuries or involving innocent motorists. They claim to be hurt in those fake accidents, but in fact, they hurt us, because their greed means it costs us more money to put our cars on the road. And that's what I call a real pain in the neck.
Eamonn with the darker side of motoring. Well, after the break, Ginny Buckley will be brushing up her motoring skills with the help of the Institute of Advanced Motorists. Stay with us. Hi, welcome back. Now then, how well do you drive? The Institute of Advanced Motorists was set up by a body of people concerned about driving standards. All responsible motorists should review their driving behaviour from time to time, but sometimes bad habits have to be pointed out by a volunteer from the Institute, as Ginny Buckley found out.
Tony, surely when you pass your test, the Department of Transport test, that qualifies you to drive on the road, and it means that you're a safe driver, you're a good driver. What's the need for an advanced test?
Well, that's the first, if you like, mistake. It qualifies you to drive on the road. It does not mean you're a safe driver. It does not mean you're a good driver. That's the first thing. All it means is you've attained that minimum level of driving ability to pass that 30-minute or so test. What happens then? You're going to be driving for another 40, 50, 60, 70 years. Vehicles change, road conditions change. You need to be able to keep your driving up to scratch, continually improve it, learn new techniques. Just as you do in a career, you learn more things about your career and how to perform your job. Driving is a key part of life. You need to improve your abilities in that key part of your life. Okay, Ginny, you've just got yourself into an unfamiliar car. Get your seatbelt on, make sure that's comfortable, make sure the seat's adjusted, including the head restraint. That head restraint looks okay for you.
Yeah,
any other seat adjustments, make sure the internal and external mirrors are okay. You feel for the clutch, the brake and the throttle, you know where they are and where the various gear positions are, particularly including reverse, and how to actually select reverse on this car. So, having familiarised yourself with that, then the basic controls, where the indicators are, the horns. We've already had a walk around the outside. We're comfortable that the tyres are okay and the tyre pressures look reasonable. We don't have a tyre pressure gauge to actually check them, but at least they look basically reasonable, the tyre pressures. Make sure you're comfortable with the positions of the steering wheel, because this car does have an adjustable steering column.
Yep.
External mirrors, okay. Right, okay. When you're just feel the handbrake as well, so you know. Cover the foot brake while you're checking the handbrake to make sure the car doesn't roll.
This is like my driving test all over again, you know.
It is very similar.
So you're going to direct me, you're going to tell me where you want me to go.
Just remember that you are in charge of the car and the driving. If I ask you to do something or make a manoeuvre, the decision's ultimately yours as to whether or not it's safe.
Now please do be kind with me, because I've not driven this car before.
Don't worry, Ginny.
And remember that I have to get in my own car and drive home afterwards, so I don't want to be too much of a wreck.
Okay, not a problem. Not a problem.
Right,
and when giving directions, when driving along, we'll always be following the road ahead, unless signs or road markings dictate otherwise.
Okay.
And I'll try and give you the directions in plenty of time. But if you do miss a direction sign or miss a direction instruction I've asked you to do, don't worry, we'll recover the situation. Not a problem.
Right, let's go then.
Okay, let's go.
On the way here this morning, I'm thinking I'm going to have to just drive as I normally would, and the fact that somebody's watching your driving, it makes you so conscious of how you're driving.
This is very true, and I mean, this is why we said, to start with, try and let people settle down, get used to the fact of having someone sat alongside them who's looking at their driving. Give them a chance to do that settling down before we actually, if you like, start giving them a critique of their driving.
So you lull them into a false sense of security, is what you're telling me?
Well, I suppose if you want to put it like that, yes, I don't have a problem with that. But I mean, at the end of the day, you kind of volunteered to do this.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's nothing mandatory or legal about it, as there is with the L test. It is, if you like, voluntary, that you decided you wish to improve your driving, and that's a good thing. You've only got to look at the carnage on the roads to appreciate that.
So this is how you start off everybody when they come along to the Institute. You'd get them in the car, you'll take them off for a drive, sit in with them and then give them a critique.
That's right. Sometimes we will actually highlight things as we're driving around, depending on the level of what's going on at the time in terms of the hazard level. Sometimes we'll ask them questions as we're driving along, providing it's safe for them to think about the answer. It's a useful habit to get into before you slow down, as you had to there because of the light changing through to red, just to check in the mirror to make sure that it's actually safe to reduce your speed.
Right.
If you've got a 38-ton Arctic sitting 2 foot from your bumper, applying your brakes is probably not a good idea.
So here we are, Tony, hitting the centre of Manchester, and this is all quite an important part of the test, city centre driving. So what would the lesson consist of? Well, basically, it's important when you're in city centre, what we try and get over the message, and it's important at all driving, is about observation, seeing what is ahead, what is around, what other drivers and other road users or potential road users are doing, assessing which lane you're in, because you get so many different lanes going left, right, straight ahead. You get one-way streets, two-way streets, you get 2 lanes in one direction, 1 lane in the other. Ginny! What? Please, for the sake of the ratchet and the mechanism of the handbrake, it'd be useful if you press the button when you apply the handbrake. More to the point, if that ratchet wears out, your handbrake could release itself without you doing anything. And more to the point, it gets on your nerves. Well, it does also get on my nerves. It's actually surprisingly audible from outside the car. OK. You've mentioned there very briefly about the safety and about looking after the car. Right. How much does the test cover that? What are the points to each other? It's not the test per se that covers the car. It's the technique and style of driving that helps reduce wear on the car. So many drivers signal what they are doing rather than what they wish to do. Signal at the last minute as they're doing it. Exactly. It drives me mad if I'm in the outside lane on the motorway and I'm doing, 70, and somebody pulls out and signals as they're pulling out in front of me and I have to slam my brakes on. Your left signal there to pull in from lane 2 to lane 1 was an ambiguous signal. Really? It was, I'm afraid. In what way? You could have been leaving the motorway. You were only 200 yards from the slip road. So here we are back in the studio after my first drive with Tony, and I must say it was like taking my test all over again, but about 10 times worse, because of course I've got into bad habits over the year. So how did I do, Tony? Well, put it this way, at no time was I looking for the ejector seat. Oh, that's good. That makes me feel OK. But I mean, there are a number of areas in which to improve. I think the key one is you are trying to go faster than your level of observation ability permits you to do so. Right. You're going faster than is safe. I'm a speed freak. Yeah, if you wish to call yourself that. But don't worry, we can tame that. OK. We can tame that. And the reason why you're going too quickly is that you're not seeing all the situations that you have to potentially plan for that will actually naturally bring your speed down, because as you realise the number of and variety of hazards there are, you will say, crikey, I've got to slow down in order to cope with them. Are you saying here that I'm exceeding speed limits? Is that what I'm doing, or is it just generally... You were certainly... I'm sticking to speed limits, but I could be going slower within them. You were certainly exceeding speed limits on a number of occasions, but equally, where you were sticking to speed limits, the legal speed limits, then there were times when you should have been going a little slower. So, Tony, am I doing anything right? Is there anything positive that's come out of this lesson today? Yes. There are a number of things that came out. One is you took great care to make sure that the car was correctly set up for you, bearing in mind it was a strange car to you. So that was very important. All too many drivers just get in a strange car and drive off. That was very important. You actually controlled the car well. It can be vastly improved, but you did actually control the car well. You're a confident driver. What we need to do is to work on your actual technique
and instill a degree of discipline, shall we say, into your driving.
That sounds like my old school reports, to be honest.
Yeah, mine were a bit like that as well.
Well, it certainly got my appetite whetted, and it's brought home to me a lot of things that I didn't realise, and things that you just do automatically without thinking about. Yes. I'm sure there'll be people watching that think, well, hey, maybe wouldn't mind having a go at that. What do they do? Well,
there are groups of people all over the country. There's about nearly 200 groups of people of the Institute of Advanced Motorists around the country. The easiest thing to contact their local, find out where their local group is, to ring the Institute, and the number's 0181 994 4403. Contact them and they will send them details of where their local people are, and they will be only too willing to help them out. And because the Institute, and indeed many and the groups, are charitable organisations, they are there because they want to do it. It's not a commercial service. They were there because they want to improve people's driving and want to increase road safety.
As we all want to do. Well, that's all for now. Join us next week for extended reports from Cyprus, where Ginny drives the all-new Jeep Wrangler and Chrysler Cherokee through some beautiful scenery and demanding 4x4 tracks. We'll leave you with some tantalising shots from that visit, and we hope to see you next week. So we'll see you then. Goodbye for now.